always have to adjust my time because my computer says 9:30. So we are at 6:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Casey, could you go ahead and start the recording, please?
Just did. We're good to go.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jess, the Programming Director of SLASC. I want to welcome you tonight to our Librarians Without Libraries. So we have a couple of great speakers tonight, and I know I said earlier in the social part that I've had a sneak preview of some of their slides, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. They actually, and I didn't even realize this till I read all the bios, everybody's actually a graduate of SJSU, all SLAers, so I'm really excited to hear them all tonight. Before we get started, a few things. If you are interested in joining SLASC, we actually have a couple of openings coming up soon. And Amy, can they contact you, or what's the best way to, if they're interested in joining?
Actually, Frances is in charge of making sure that applications are, when they're received, that she follows up with the applications and the applicants. So there is a website that we have that's specific to sending to, rather than to me in general. And I'll type that in.
Yeah, the SLASC Gmail is a good one to use.
I think it's sjsu.slasc@gmail.com, right?
Correct.
Oh,
yay,
perfect.
Jessica.
Yay.
Good.
So we do have open an assistant membership director as well as an assistant programming director. So you can help do programs like the one we're doing tonight. If you need more info, go to our website and that will tell you a little bit more specifics about what those entail. If you want to shoot me an email to find out a little bit more about what programming entails, Frances can tell you what membership entails, what all we do. But yeah, and then Amy put the email address in there, so please contact us if you are interested. And then, like Frances mentioned earlier, I know she put into the chat, remember to take the survey for a chance to win a $25 gift card tonight. And we will be live tweeting this tonight. The hashtag we're using is not a library. So Michio, our social media director, is going to be doing that. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker tonight. We have Ann Barker that is joining us. She is an information specialist in the legal department at Genentech, I'm sorry. And I was lucky enough to get to meet her on something that's doing something that we both love, and that is drinking cider at the SLA conference in Baltimore. So welcome, Ann, and go ahead and you can get started.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and start to share my screen. And just as an FYI, either Genentech or Genentech is fine. There is a lot of debate about which is the correct way to say the company name. Apparently, it depends on if you put the emphasis on genetic or engineering, if it's Genentech or Genentech. So either is just fine. So the slides I have tonight are pretty lighthearted, and as the title suggests, I will be referring back to the three outside of work interests that I mentioned in my longer bio, which is available on the website. So don't be too surprised when that happens. So as Jess said, I work at Genentech, or Genentech. There is, sorry, it's a little bit, I'm just going to minimize my video screen here so I can actually see what's on my slides. There we go. So it's a fairly large campus in South San Francisco. We have 14,000 employees, and this is generally a picture of the campus. You see in the upper left, that's the manufacturing portion of the campus where the antibodies and drugs are made. Over to the right, and also kind of further to the right and back behind is all of where the science stuff happens. And those three buildings in the center there is the corporate stuff. And I work in the legal department, which takes up about 2 floors of one of those buildings. So although Genentech has 14,000 employees, personally I work in the legal department. Primarily, most of the work that I do is supporting the patent group and specifically patent prosecution, which doesn't mean what a lot of people think. When they think of prosecution, they think about courtroom dramas and the prosecution rests kind of thing. But prosecution in patent language actually means the back and forth process with the patent office of writing, applying for, and hopefully ultimately getting a granted patent. So I support about 40 patent prosecutors, and that's about 90% of the work I do is for the patent prosecution side of things. I'd say about 9% of the work I do is for the litigators, and that is also primarily patent litigation. There's about 10 attorneys in that realm. And then every so often something else will come in from another portion of legal, but most of the other folks are fairly self-sufficient, and it's the patent folks who need a lot of assistance. There is technically a library room on the floor, but it basically just has old books that were collected when the corporate library shut down more than a decade ago, and it was recently converted to a lounge. So it's kind of a comfy sitting room that has some old scientific literature on the shelves. But for me, most of my work, almost all of my work, is done using electronic databases. The specific work and responsibilities, I mentioned the patent prosecution. Primarily what I do is research. There's very little else, and so it's just a matter of what color of research it is. For the patent prosecution side, it's a lot of looking up in patent databases, looking for patents that are targeting specific genes. It can be keyword searches, it can be sequence searches where since we're working on the biotech side, we're not talking about small molecule drugs very much, although we do have a portfolio of that as well. We're talking a lot about the antibody side, and those sequences can be quite long. And we're looking for patents which reference those similar sequences at a certain percent identity. That's how that's referenced. There's some assignee searching, looking for patent portfolios of a given company, and answering kind of a few competitive intelligence type questions about who our top competitors might be in a particular space, or how many patent filings our competitors are doing to make sure that our R&D focus and budget is comparable in the field. In addition to patent searching, there's some non-patent scientific literature searching where we're looking for prior art, or prior art is kind of what came before. Is this actually a new novel invention, or is there something else that we need to know about before we proceed? Looking at corporate filings as well, and news articles, trying to discern what some of the business decisions might be that our competitors are making. There's pipeline research, so there are specific databases that are generally the first place that new drug molecules will surface, so we can see what the space looks like surrounding a specific gene target, and clinical trial information to see what's going on in that space. And that's, that's patent prosecution side. That's 90% of it. For the patent litigators, it's a lot of looking at court dockets, some, what patents have been litigated, how litigious is a certain entity. Claim construction is another kind of term of art specific to patent litigation. When you are writing your patent application, the whole meat of what will be granted is in the claims. I claim that this invention does this, that, and the other thing. And the claim language becomes very important in terms of how a term is defined. And you might not think that what the word about means can be construed differently, but different courts construe what the word about means very differently. So looking at how different courts have defined that term in litigation. So clearly, a lot of research is what I do. The skills that are used in that regard, it's understanding what databases are available and what content is in similarly seeming, databases that seem very similar. Different patent databases cover different countries and different time periods. And if you run a search in one database and assume that you have everything, that may or may not be true. Of course, understanding how the databases are constructed and learning the specific search syntax for each, and the ability to learn new databases quickly. Understanding how to search in terms of thinking of synonyms and alternate ways to look at, to phrase things, reviewing your results, and of course, recalibrating your search based on what you're finding. And then the part that I enjoy probably most of all is the synthesizing part, where, you know, as I mentioned, several different types of databases. And sometimes a project is only using one of those databases. Other times, if it's a real business search, it can be looking at many, many, many different types of information. So putting that all together, providing a high-level summary with your key findings, and then a well-organized report of all the results. And here we go on to the lighthearted bit. So this is the first of the three interests, and Jess had mentioned this in the intro, is the CIDR. So basically what I do is I learn how to get from that pile of CIDR, which is actually, you may not know it from looking at it, but it's a pretty well curated collection of CIDR. It is not well organized. So, yay! I got my special CIDR rack a couple years ago. Put all my CIDR up there, well organized, and that's kind of what I'm doing on a daily basis with information. There's, of course, the soft skills of communication. I was an English major in undergrad, so writing skills have been a key part of this whole synthesizing of information and writing up an executive summary. Asking questions, breaking down what can be a pretty complex issue into its component parts to see which information source is going to be the correct place to look for the information that you're looking for. And a typical day looks like, generally, it's a fairly reactionary position in that you are answering queries from the attorneys as they come in. There is some more proactive work that's being done, looking at new databases, new search systems. We're looking currently at new collaboration systems for attorneys and scientists to communicate with each other about various sets of patent results. But, you know, you get in the morning, check and respond to your email, start on anything that's a rush. And then once you've got that under control, continue with your outstanding requests. And if there's nothing else currently in your queue, looking at those long-term, more proactive projects. So it's a lot of juggling a load of requests for various people and trying to do it with a little balance, grace, and a genuine smile if you really can. Okay. So I'm going to move on to my career pathway, how I got to this state of being with the second of the interests. A couple years ago, I decided I really was interested in working with glass, and particularly glass blowing. And I'm fortunate enough that there is a industrial arts, that's what it's called, an industrial arts center close enough to my house that I've been able to take some glass blowing. And this is a sketch of the vase that I wanted to make on the second day of the Glass Blowing 2 class that I took last year. So I did not go to library school or become a librarian because I really liked books, or I really wanted to teach people how to find what they were looking for. I personally like doing research, and I like learning something new every day, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. As I mentioned, I was an English major in undergrad. I was actually a double major with theater arts. And it was always with the idea of doing research. I was initially a performance major, but really it became very quickly apparent that I was more interested in doing the research behind productions. So after college, I moved to California, and I had an internship at Berkeley Repertory Theater. And I stayed there for 2 years. I read scripts. I did help with research for productions, either looking at historical productions. We did a production of Macbeth, and the director wanted to know kind of what is the scope of what has already been done with Macbeth. I want to know what's been out there so that you know, I can do something new and different. And of course, Macbeth has been done a lot of times, but giving a general overview of that was one example. Or doing historical and cultural research for character development to help the actors in their roles. And that was great. I enjoyed it a lot, but it paid $300 a month in the Bay Area, and I had to pay rent. I did have some part-time jobs to go with that, but it was kind of past time for me to figure out something else. So my plan altered a bit, and I started working through, you know, getting to the path of today. I thought maybe film. There, being in the Bay Area, Lucasfilm was right up the road from where I was working in Berkeley, just across the bridge. So I did get an entry-level position at LucasArts, which was the video game portion of the Lucas empire at the time. Sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I started at LucasArts because I was hoping to get a position at the Lucasfilm Research Library. And I did interview up there with some very kind librarians who took pity on me and gave me some of their time out of the day. And they basically said, you need to go get your master's in library science before we'll even consider you. So that's what I did. And I started at San Jose State. It was during the conversion period. There was a time back in the day when things were all in person. That was not particularly my style, partially because San Jose is fairly far away from Marin County, which is where I live. But it was the time when they were changing over. So about half of my classes were in person and half of them were online, and half of those that were in person were either at Sonoma State as a week-long intensive or at San Francisco State on a Thursday evening. So I was able to make that work. I noticed in the chat before we began someone mentioning a one class at a time while working full-time schedule, and that is exactly what I did. It took me 5 years to finish the degree at San Jose State because I was taking one class a semester, including summers. So it took a while, and I was not in my entry-level position at LucasArts that whole time. I did move on. And when I finished my degree, the company I was at in between I was doing research there as well, but it's not really worth mentioning. The first job, my first real librarian job after I finished the degree was at a patent boutique law firm. And I stayed there for 10 years, surviving. There were a lot of law firms emerged, and there were lots of layoffs happening in the mid-2000s, as you can imagine, during the financial downturn. And there was a merger that between my firm and another firm. I managed to survive that. I really loved the job. There were some cultural changes after the merger that kind of came on slowly, but it wasn't really the right fit for me anymore. So I decided to start looking. And when I started at Genentech, or when I selected Genentech, I was in a very enviable position in that I actually had 2 job offers at the same time. And that is not something that is easy to come by. And I understand that that's an enviable position to be in. But it was after a lot of interviews with other companies that did not result in job offers. And what I had learned from that interviewing process was that the employers that were not law firms were quick to pigeonhole. They weren't entirely convinced that I could do something that wasn't legal because I'd been in a law firm for 10 years. What else could I possibly know and do? So I had the position at Genentech, which, yes, is in the legal department, and it is patent focused, but it is also at a biotechnology company. It's very science focused. The other position that was up in the air was at another law firm. So it was very similar to what I had been doing. But I knew that if I took the law firm position, I would basically be a law librarian for the rest of my time in the workforce. Because if I went 10 years at a law firm to another long-term law firm gig, and then went out into the marketplace, I kind of, from my interviewing experience, it seemed to me as though it was pretty clear it'd be difficult for an employer to see me as something else. So I chose Genentech. I chose something that was very different than what I had been doing, specifically as a way to broaden my experience and my skill set and to learn some new resources. And also to highlight the versatility that comes with a librarian degree to the next potential employer down the road. So I started off looking at one thing, and in the end, I came up with something different. And it may not look exactly like a budding flower kind of vase. It might look more like a kelp forest in the middle of the ocean, but I still ended up with a pretty darn neat vase that I made all on my own. So your original plan may not be what you end up with, but you can still end up with something neat. So I'm going to move along to my final points, which are just kind of the last notes of pieces of wisdom and advice, I suppose. And also, of course, the third interest area, which is raccoons. My husband and I rehabilitate orphaned and injured raccoons, and these are 3 of the babies from last year playing around in our yard. So the whole point of this is, kind of my advice is to find a mentor. When I got my first law librarian position after school, I was very fortunate because I basically found a boss who wanted to build me in her image. I was a baby librarian and she had many years, and she liked to take new librarians and train people to do things the way that she liked to keep them. And she became a mentor and was very good at that. You can't always select who your boss is, but you can find mentors in other ways. And I'm going to pitch twice here in a row SLA as one way to do that. Find yourself a mentor. Find someone who is doing something that you want to be doing. Make yourself stretch and find them and work with them, and they can help introduce you to other people and can help you navigate the world. And get involved with a professional association, whether that's SLA or something else. And by get involved, I don't mean just join. You have to volunteer. It will help you gain skills, it will help you network, and it will gain you friends along the way. Apply for jobs that you don't necessarily have all the skills for. There might have been a reason that Genentech was a little bit skeptical about me, and it wasn't just because I was working in a law firm for 10 years, because it was a legal department position. But I had no science experience whatsoever. I was a theater and English arts major in undergrad, and I hadn't taken a chemistry class since freshman year of college. Biology was unknown, and they didn't quite. There was a lot of convincing during the interview process that I could do this. I knew I could do this because I do understand databases, and I do understand searching, and I do understand how to put it all together and put pieces together into a synthesized analysis. But what really the key is, I didn't have everything they were looking for in their job description. They wanted someone who had everything. They wanted someone who had 10 years of patent search experience and an advanced degree, not just an undergraduate, but an advanced degree in chemistry or biology. They clearly couldn't find someone who had everything. And I was convincing enough, I suppose, that I was able to get in there. So just don't worry about it too much if you don't have hit every mark on the job description. And I think actually that is where I'm going to stop and just put up my contact information. I do have a Twitter account. I am on Twitter about 2 weeks a year, right around SLA conference time. And otherwise, I'm not on there too frequently, although I pop up now and again. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. And I think that takes up my time. So I'm going to stop sharing and let the next person start.
All right, thank you so much, Anne, and we definitely have some questions in the chat there. We're going to do a Q&A at the end of the presentation tonight, so we'll make sure we keep track of all those questions, and we will ask you again at the end. But it was good seeing you again.
Nice to see you.
All right, so our next presenter tonight is Scott Brown, who is a senior librarian at Oracle Incorporated, and some of you may know him as Professor Brown here at SJSU. So, Scott, if you want to take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Anne, and actually thank you, Sarah and Jess, for hosting us. And thank you, Anne, for describing your research process so well, because mine is very similar, so I don't have to cover that, which is great. So thank you. So my official job title is actually librarian, which surprised me. I work for an organization called Oracle Incorporated, which you may know, software company, established literally 40 years ago now, I think, but very big company, has software in a variety of different areas. It's possible that your organization uses it. A lot of people swear by Oracle, some people swear at Oracle, but I'm fortunate enough to have been there since October of 2014, so about 4.5 years now. And I actually, not only do I not have a library, but I don't have an office. I work remotely, and I'm based in Portland, Oregon. So that's me in the middle, and that's me actually at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. The guy you see with me on the right is a programmer actually that I work with who's based in Spain, who was visiting for a Python conference, and so I had to take him to Powell's, and we're both very excited to be there. On the bottom half, you see actually my senior director, Kirsten Ward, and the guy you see there with me, his name is Nick Roberts, and I actually work quite a bit doing research with a top talent executive program within the organization, and Nick is one of the people that I work with most closely. He's based in the UK. So our entire group is distributed essentially across the US. Oracle is 135,000 people. So it's a very big company. It is a global company. Again, there is no physical library. And our team consists of, these are our acronyms, which are horrible, horrible acronyms. But I'll explain what they are. So VILS is Virtual Information and Learning Services. We used to be Virtual Information Services, and started out as a small team of 3. And essentially our team of 3, including me, is the full team. And so, and then we're part of a larger group called HR Communications, Information and Learning Services, and then again another mouthful and a horrible acronym. But we report up essentially through learning and development, and ultimately through HR. And much of the HR group is remote flex workers. So we work out of our offices or out of flex offices. And so there's 2 main buckets of work that we do to kind of simplify things and move rather quickly. One is to manage and drive awareness of and access to the enterprise-wide resources that are available across the company and across the world. So that runs the gamut all the way from technical resources like ACM Digital Library and IEEE Explore, to business resources like Financial Times, for example, and to some extent a little bit of market research, and then also resources like lynda.com, LinkedIn Learning, Harvard Managed Mentor for soft skills. So we essentially manage and drive a lot of that content within the company. The other big half of what I do is a lot of what Anne does. It's not patent research, but research across any kind of topic, business topic that might benefit strategic groups, strategic projects that are going on within the company. So it can be anything from, I recently worked on a request from one of the labs folks where they wanted to know something. They wanted to know some information around the behavior of bees in beehives, because they're working on a project to put sensors in beehives so they can understand the health of the hives across different places in Europe. So that's actually a partnership they're working on. To things like what are our competitors doing? What's the competitive market doing? What's going on out there in the world? To I recently fielded a request from a colleague who's based in Japan, who wanted some resources on procrastination and dealing with procrastination. And so it's, to kind of echo what Anne was saying, every day I am learning something new, which is kind of fascinating. And it's never, ever boring. So to quickly chart my course and try and move even more quickly, I've been in public, I guess academic, it was community college and corporate settings. So I started off as a page in the Santa Cruz Public Library in Santa Cruz, California. Went to Carrillo College, which is a small community college actually. They still had a card catalog when I went and joined them, and worked with them going through their automation process, as well as merging a collection that was cataloged both in Dewey and in Library of Congress. So that was an interesting project. I actually couldn't afford to work there because they didn't pay me enough. And so I went fully over to corporate world, which is West Marine. And if you've ever sailed, you know the name West Marine. If you haven't, you don't, and I didn't. But working at West Marine and actually working through the top part, I became really interested in library ILS systems, so innovative interfaces and those kinds of systems. And when I went to San Jose, I was hoping that I was going to essentially come out, and I thought one of the coolest jobs would be to do training for one of the big ILS systems, to know the system so well know the ins and outs of it and be able to train people, I just thought that would be the coolest thing ever. So when I went to San Jose State, and actually this was pre-online, and so I was driving over the hill from Santa Cruz to San Jose, which over Highway 17, if you know the area, you know that's a horrible highway to drive. I took every single technology class that I could take at the time. So HTML, using the database, and using SQL queries, because I thought that's what I wanted to do. At the end of my tenure, I got a practicum at Sun Microsystems, and this was late 1999, so right at the peak of the dot-com bubble. And Sun was one of the coolest places to be, and I was very lucky to get the practicum. And so I was doing web kind of maintaining some of their web pages when I was there. Had no idea what I was going to do. But when I graduated, they had a contract position to do research. And research was not something I had ever intended to do or had ever trained to do. I took one class at San Jose State, but it was the late 90s and it was a cool company to work for. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. And so taking literally a 20% pay cut, losing benefits, going to a contract position with a 2-year-old daughter, which in retrospect, it's like, what was I thinking? But it all worked out. And exchanging it for a very dangerous commute, I started working at Sun Microsystems, and thankfully 9 months later, they offered me a full-time position with benefits. So that worked out. I was with Sun doing research essentially in the tech arena for a little over 9 years. I ran my own consulting firm, I guess you'd call it, social information group, for about 4 years, and actually got a second master's in community counseling, and then worked for Qualcomm starting in 2012. That's actually where I worked with Jamie. So got to work with Jamie a little bit at Qualcomm, and then came to Oracle in 2014. But part of the reason that I want to share that is just to illustrate the how well you can plan and think you know where you're going to go and have it take a completely different turn, and in some respects have it be really turn out pretty okay. So I want to talk really quickly and share a few key points before I pass it over to Jamie. So why corporate? Especially coming from a public and an academic setting previously, what I really liked about corporate was it's very fast paced. It's very interesting. In contrast to my experience, it was typically well funded. So someone would say, hey, why don't we do this? And someone would say, okay, let's do it. And it's kind of like, what? You have the money to do that? Which was a very different experience for me. It is very dynamic and fast changing. It can also be chaotic. And so if you don't have a temperament for that, it's a bad setting for you, generally. But generally, the environments that I've been in welcome at least some extent of experimentation, whether that's in what you're offering or what you want to try or what you want to do. And that's something that I actually really enjoy. And again, as Ann said, and as you know, I can testify, pretty much every day I learn something new. So that's why corporate for me. As far as kind of skills and building your career and your skill portfolio, to use a big word, there's the phrase, you know, say yes to things. I modify that a little bit to say yes to the challenge, to those things that challenge you. You know, there have been instances in my career where someone has asked me to do something or take on something where I'm not sure I can do it, but I say, okay, I'll give it a try. Sometimes they fail, but they don't always fail. And to me, there's a couple of different aspects that I want to share here, because I'll say yes a lot of times especially when people I trust ask me to do something, because ironically, while I have some idea of what I'm good at, I actually don't have a clear picture of everything I'm good at. I've had mentors and colleagues, again, people that I trust tell me that they think I do a really good job at something, and I don't think I would, and I actually am able to do a good job. And so they see things that I don't necessarily see. So it's kind of recognizing my blind spots in a way. And then in the process of that, part of that, what that does is help push myself in a way that actually grows my skills. It grows my resiliency. It grows my confidence in myself. And of course, kind of builds my list of accomplishments. And the reason I share this is, remember getting the big box of 64 crayons? Isn't that an awesome feeling? It's like, oh my God, I've got all these colors, right? It's going from the small box to the big box. And to me, this is where I think of my skills as this, right? You start off with 6 skills and then you grow them to 12 and to 24. And when an employer sees that you've got this breadth of skills, and Anne was talking about, you know, the value of volunteering and building that portfolio, it's like getting the box of 64 crayons, you know, having someone who can do that on your team. So anyway, thanks for indulging me on that picture. If you haven't seen this one, and I'm going to try and move even a little bit faster here, this is actually something that San Jose State produces every year. This goes out and looks at job postings. It looks at skills most in demand by employers. The URL is at the bottom there. It's in the career site on the iSchool site. But I look at this every year, and I think it's fascinating. Number one, that the top skill isn't library skills, right? It's communication and interpersonal skills, collaboration, teamwork. And that's absolutely true in every single setting that I've been in. And to me, I have a creative writing background. My bachelor's is in poetry, actually. And I never thought I took that because, you know, it was something I wanted to do. And it's actually come in extremely handy throughout my career, where, you know, I've written articles, I've written books, I'm writing and creating content every day internally, and so it just has come in very handy. And again, as you know, I'll echo that again. As far as you know, SLA, you can build leadership skills. I've done vendor relations, communications and marketing, working in teams. It's been really phenomenal. So I'll wrap up with a few quotes very quickly. This is a fantastic quote from Sir Ken Robinson. To me, this echoes coming back to saying yes and taking risks. What I've found is, if I can keep myself curious and continue to explore and kind of experiment, I'm able to continually build my skills and continually make myself more valuable as a potential employee, and just as a person who has a set of skills to offer the world, and kind of go out there and do that. And another one, this is really, to me, related to saying yes again as well, is that what happens is, for me, I think this equation is true, that, and I'm at a point in my career where I have the luxury, or at least some leeway in choosing whom I'm working with, whether that's professionally or, you know, within the larger association or something like that. What I found is that the people that I'm working with are oftentimes more important, or just as important, at least, as what I'm doing. And so, to me, what this really speaks to is the value of networking, and ultimately is a really strong benefit of my career. And your network really comes from your past and current employment, from your volunteer work, your professional association connections, internships and practicums from all parts of your life. And you never know where your next position may come from, whether it's, you know, professionally within an association. It's just, you just never know. And so I know I ran through that really quickly. Here's my contact information. Feel free to email me. Make sure you put the R in the middle there, because there's a few different Scott Browns at Oracle. But I'm absolutely happy to do informational interviews, network, answer questions, simply be in touch, whatever you'd like. So let me stop sharing and pass it over to Jamie.
All right, thank you so much, Scott. And I want to remind everybody, if you have any questions for Scott or for Anne or for Jamie, who's our next speaker, make sure to put them into the chat now. We'll also have a time that you can just ask them out loud using the mic later. But if you have anything, you can do that. Yes, I think we can probably make the presenters' contact information available after this. And actually, you guys, if you want to put maybe your email addresses right into the chat, that'll probably be really helpful, so everybody will have that. Thank you guys so much. Okay, and without further ado, before we go on, remember to go on and do Francis, if you could do post the link to the survey for your last chance to win that Barnes & Noble gift card. And remember that we are also live tweeting this with the hashtag Not a Library. And without further ado, Jamie Lynn is going to be joining us next. She is an education technology designer at Bridgepoint Education.
Thank you, and thank you, Scott and Anne. I just want to verify that you're seeing the correct screen because I have 2 screens. Somebody let me know.
Yes, it looks like you're good.
Great. Okay. So I think I'm going to really build a lot on what Scott and Anne have shared already. But my work is a little bit different than theirs. I was not planning to be a librarian without a library. And so here's sort of the whole summary of what happened. And I do want to mention too that if I were not giving, if we were doing this live, I would probably animate every single step of these as I said it, because I'm thinking also about different internet speeds and the way that webinars sometimes have a lag. I have very little animation in this particular presentation for that reason. So if you like to scan ahead, you're going to know everything that I'm about to say. But basically, I'll read off of this. So I started off as a library aide in the LA County Public Library System, and that's when I decided to get my library school degree. Given where I was in life, an online degree was the only option for me, and I started at SJSU in 2009. It also took me 5 years to do the program. I moved several times. I had a baby, and it was a one course per semester sort of deal. During that time that I was at SJSU, I did 2 internships. One at a school library. It was a grades 6 through 12, I believe, and then one at a large public university. And I was so sure I was going to be an academic librarian. The track that I did at SJSU was academic librarian. But I also found that technology was extremely exciting, and I took many different tech courses, including the web design course, which included Drupal, because at that point, I think the library, it was called SLIS at the time, School of Library and Information Service Sciences, one of those. iSchool is a little easier to remember. It was switching to the Drupal format, and so I also learned how to create a website in Drupal. And during this time, I really started to develop an interest in understanding how people learn, and that has really been something that that still remains and is central to my work. And so, okay, and then I should say too that I'm quite a bit older than I look. I'm in my early 40s, and librarianship was my second career, and I feel like I made a lot of different not mistakes so much, but I could have planned things better, in the early part of my life. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was have a job working in libraries immediately after graduation. I didn't want to be unemployed and searching. I had done that for many years in several different sort of time periods of my life and industries. And so public libraries wanted you to have they require that you have your degree before you even apply, and same with academic librarians. And so I had never even considered corporate work, but I joined the local SLA chapter, the San Diego chapter, and as a student, and started attending some of their networking events, and I met some really cool people from Qualcomm. And Qualcomm, for those of you who don't live in San Diego, it is here anyway, in San Diego, it's like everybody knows the name, and outside of San Diego, no one's heard of it. It's a mobile technology company, and through networking, through SLA, I ended up with a job at Qualcomm. And Scott, as he mentioned, we met there. He was actually the hiring manager, and he was my manager at Qualcomm, and that was my introduction to corporate librarianship and the corporate world in general. So what I learned from Qualcomm, and by the way, there was a library at Qualcomm, so you'll see in the photo that there are books behind me, and this is funny, I was making the slides last night, and this picture showed up on my Facebook as in this, on this day 4 years ago. And so I don't know if you can see, depending on how big your screen is, but my little caption there is lifelong librarian learner. And I think both Anna and Scott talked about how, everything that we do, we're constantly learning something new. And that's one of the things that is so exciting about the work that we do, regardless of what it is. So there is no longer a library at Qualcomm. My role was not in a more traditional position because there were more traditional library positions with the team, but mine was in research and analysis. And, just based on that title, you can tell that it was a very cerebral sort of job. Let's see. So okay. So my slides are actually like guiding me and telling me what I'm going to say next. So what I learned from it was that there are many information sources way beyond what I learned about as a student. This is the world of extremely specialized and expensive databases that give you all sorts of different kind of information. So I had access to so many wonderful databases and information. And I really learned the best way of presenting that information. So, sometimes it could be something as quick as calling somebody to say, hey, I found what you're looking for. This is the information. And sometimes it was more of a PowerPoint or even a video. And then what I also learned from Qualcomm, because of it being a corporation, was that it was very action-oriented. There was a lot of action all the time. It meant that I needed to be very adaptable, learn by doing, and things move fast, move with them. It was a busy, exciting time, and I was laid off shortly before my second year there, and the good news is I did really like the job, and I loved the people I worked with, but I also wasn't really feeling, I thought I had learned a vast amount, and I knew also that I learned that I didn't really want to work as a corporate researcher in mobile technology for my career. So luckily, my SLA network landed me my next job at Bridgepoint Education, and I don't know if I actually included this on my bio that it was Bridgepoint Education, and the reason why I didn't mention the company name is because it's in the middle of a huge transition right now, and the name is changing. So, tomorrow I may not be working for Bridgepoint Education, it might be something else. But I joined 3 years ago as the Digital Technologies Librarian and working with the library. So I did have a library, but it was an online library. The company itself right now is in the middle of a major transformation. And so earlier this month, I was informed that my position on the library team was eliminated, and that I had the option of severance, which, by the way, severance packages are a fantastic perk of corporate work, and or a transfer to the educational technology team. And so I decided that I would try it for a bit. So now I am an ed tech designer. So I am really a librarian without a library. I don't even work with the library anymore. And it really begs the question of whether or not I'm still a librarian. Before I get into that philosophical thought, I do want to say that when I was with the library, there were 12 people at its largest, which was in 2017. Currently, there are 4 full-time librarians and 2 part-time librarians, plus 2 tech people who are not librarians who assist with the tech, the back end. So things are definitely changing for the library. However, my ed tech team is currently a team of 4 people and is rapidly getting larger and is projected to grow significantly. And we work very closely with 10 instructional designers. So there's 14 people working on course developments. And what I did before with the library was create multimedia learning objects specific to library topics. What I do now is create multimedia learning objects, but for a variety of different university courses. I should also mention that that all of this education that I work with is online education, and so you all as online students get a taste of it from the user end, and so all the work that I do is really to try and engage online students, and I know how isolating it can be, and it's really tough to watch a long, boring video. So I try and make fun videos that help, I don't know, liven things up a bit. So because it is an online environment, I do work in the office, but we have a flexible schedule. The library team, I was working 80% remote. My current team, I work 2 days a week from home, and we do a lot of Zoom meetings. So what was I going, okay, where was I saying? Let me go back. I forget which slide is next, what's coming up to. So let's see. Oh, yes. Just a question for you, I guess. How many librarians do you think it takes to change a light bulb? And the answer is, so the thing about corporate work is that there is always going to be a lot of change. And, you know, you could say that in public libraries there are as well, because public libraries are, you know, depending on what the budget is like for the year, there's going to be a lot of change. But for sure, change in the corporate setting is quite a different beast. And especially now with my company, I think that there's a lot of, there are a lot of unknowns, and certain types of people are very anxious and stressed out about it. And I like to think of it as an opportunity, especially with how drastic the transformation that my current company is attempting right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of a huge chance to learn new things. And really, learning new things for me is what it's all about. But again, so I'm going to go back to the question now of, am I still a librarian? Because, like I said, I used to work for the library. I no longer do. You know, I'm really doing. I'm basically creating engaging content for a variety of different subjects for online learning. And so, yeah, based on that, I guess what really is a librarian anyway? I think of librarianship and libraries, a librarian as an identity. So to me, a librarian is somebody who knows how to search for something and then find it. Once you find it, organize it, analyze it, synthesize it, and then share it. And I think that no matter what kind of work you do, whether it be patent research or corporate research or what I do, which is figuring out an instructional concept and finding a way of designing it or presenting it in a way that helps people learn. I think that qualifies as librarianship. And I definitely always say that I identify as a librarian. I may not do traditional library things, and don't ask me anything about Dewey Decimal System. I have no idea, but I self-identify as a librarian. Okay, so I'm not really sure why I put the slide in here, except to demonstrate that, what was I demonstrating? I don't really use PowerPoint very often, and I think that this was for me a test of what can I do with this program. We usually see slides that are bullet points or the latest trend, which I really dislike, please don't do this, is getting a gigantic stock photo and then just putting like some text over that. I really don't like that. So, I'm a designer, and I would, actually, I'm going to play that one again. Let's see. I would probably not choose to do something like this. It's definitely flashy, right? I think what it was, okay, so the point of the slide was that I find lots of little pieces of information, try and create a pattern out of them, and then from there, voila, suddenly, figured out what it all means. But I was going to delete the slide because it didn't fit with everything else that I had put together, and then I decided to leave it because I think it exemplifies like who I am. I'm like, okay, what can I do here? What can I learn from this? How could I best present this information? And here's an option, here's a potential way of doing it. But I think that I really left it in here sort of to be like, hey, cool, animations. And then also just like, I'm learning to do a few things that I don't normally do. And exploring what you can do with PowerPoint. Actually, I don't work with Microsoft Office documents in my day-to-day job, but but you can do a lot with Word, you can do a lot with PowerPoint in terms of design and making things look nice. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so once you have all this information, you have the data that you have created a story and you are going to share it, then, I always think about who am I trying to communicate this information to, and why? Like, what is it that they need to know and why? And then what is the best way of sharing this information? I create a lot of interactive multimedia, videos, infographics. Sometimes I just pick up the phone and call somebody to let them know what I found. Knowing who your user is will definitely determine how you go about sharing all this information, and I think that's something that's really important in my job and in being a librarian. No matter what you're doing and no matter what area or field you're working in, is you have a certain knowledge. You've learned something, you've researched something. So how are you going to share it? And understanding who your user is and how you're going to communicate to them is just as important as the information that you are finding and wanting to share. So to build off that, what is a desirable skill set? It really is, it's internal. It's about your willingness to learn, and your self-motivation to find all the learning opportunities that you can. And then the collaboration and communication part. And it means, being brave enough to turn your video on and talk to people and put yourself out there, really. And what I wanted to say, I do work as a designer, and many of you may say, well, I'm really not tech savvy at all. I don't have a good graphic design eye, so, anything she's saying is not really relevant. I just want to point out that the software I knew how to use before I started this kind of work was basically Microsoft Office, and it was basically Microsoft Word. I was also an English major, so hey, I can write a story. But so now the software I use, is mostly Adobe Creative Suite, Camtasia, which is a screen capture program, Storyline, which makes interactive multimedia. It's sort of like PowerPoint on steroids, and Beyond, which is cartoon animation and like a animated whiteboard. And then this is just an example of my first time using InDesign. I created a strat plan for the library team, and I didn't know how to use this program. Your friends are going to be YouTube, lynda.com, and Google, and it really is. This is where that whole self-motivation comes in. No one's gonna hand you a textbook and say, hey, we need you to do this, please learn this. We need you to do this. Can you do this? Yes, I'm a librarian. I know how to do this. I can, if I don't know how, I'm gonna learn how, because I know how to search on the internet and find that information out so that I can teach myself, so that I can do it. So regardless of whether or not I have a job in a month or so, given the nature of corporate work, I feel very confident that that my skill set is going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, and not just, obviously the technology side is great because ed tech is one of the hot new spaces. So for that's one thing. But I think just knowing I have full confidence in my ability to flex, to learn something new, that willingness and interest to learn. And I think that when you start applying for positions and interviewing, that's I think that comes through, and when you're talking to people, and especially for entry-level positions, that's more important really than your job history and your experience. It's just like, is this somebody who is going to, jump in and give it their all and work well and communicate well and be a team player? I think those things are really important. So in summary, some things to know about corporate work. 1, expect to work hard, be flexible, and to learn on the fly. I think I have covered that. There is no job security. Layoffs are to be expected. So I was laid off at Qualcomm. At Bridgepoint, I have witnessed 3 layoffs, and then, and of course, this last one where I was offered the choice between leaving the company or transferring. I don't think that this is a bad thing because I'm the type of person who really likes to innovate. I like to take some risks. I get excited with this whole idea of moving really quickly and learning something new. I think that both academic and public libraries, not to knock them because there's, there are wonderful things about both, and I definitely considered, being a public librarian when I first started. But as I really understand myself better, I just know that the bureaucracy for me, I can't do it. Like for a tenure track position, having to be very careful what I say for 7 years or so until I get tenure, I'm very outspoken. It's not gonna work for me. And every day there's something new. It's so exciting. And number 4, get paid a decent salary. That helps for sure. And so many opportunities to grow, to learn, flex, challenge, and lead. Especially, of course, in SLA, which I think, because it's a smaller library organization, there's so many different opportunities to volunteer and to get that leadership really quickly, which then translates into your work world. I think when I was working closely with a team of librarians, and they really looked to me as somebody who could advocate for them and as a leader. And I think that a lot of that had to do with my experience, both working at Qualcomm, but very much so with SLA and with the opportunities that SLA presented for me. And finally, really, I mean, corporate work is not for everyone. You know yourself best. You know, if something like an environment like this is going to just cause you undue stress and anxiety, don't do that to yourself. But I personally feel like I can work anywhere, do pretty much anything because my skills are transferable. And that's a really good feeling. Okay, so then the very last is you can find me on LinkedIn. My avatar on LinkedIn is that cartoon character, so don't look for my photo because it's gonna be that one. And I actually need to update her since my hair has changed now. But yeah, feel free to email me and connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will stop and we can start doing we can do Q&A.
Thank you all so much. I know you have just put a lot of information to us, but it's been fantastic. Thank you. I know there have been a lot of questions in the chat. So Casey, do you want to go ahead and do some of those questions, please?
Yeah, we actually had a lot of questions in the chat, a lot of questions that got answered. So hopefully I've got a comprehensive list of things that haven't been answered yet. So we'll just start with Jamie, since you were the most recent. We've got a question from Carter, and the question is, have you found yourself in a change of leadership position at any point, and if so, what were some of the good tools and other complications to the experience?
I am not in a leadership position. does that affect the question? I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Does that mean that if the leadership of my team has changed? I'm not. If you can elaborate on that, that would help.
Yeah. So just I think it's talking about like leading changes, helping to institute changes. What were some of the good tools or complications you had from those experiences?
I have really been a passenger on the whole change ride, and I think that for me it's fascinating just to watch what's happening and to sort of have my opinions on what I think should be happening, and then just see what the people in charge do from it. Yeah, I am not in a leadership position. I'm actually I don't want a leadership position at this point in my life. I'm really happy with what I'm doing, and I think having that extra responsibility of my decisions actually having really big, like having it mean something really large would be a little more stress than I'm looking for.
Oh, I understand completely.
So, yeah, so I'm sorry if that don't think that answers your question, but I don't have that experience. Maybe Scott has some experience with that.
Scott?
Not necessarily from a leadership position, but for myself, I find that one of my best, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but one of my best ways of dealing with it is being curious and trying to stay open. In my head, I can be very judgmental of what's going on in a given change, but staying curious and being willing to ask questions, and being willing to try and influence where I can. If there's something that if there's something, a direction that I think should be pursued is, I think similar to what Jamie was saying is, and I don't know if Jamie, if you make your opinions known or not, but making them known, I guess, as tactfully as possible. Sometimes you can't, sometimes there's no way to manage that, but it's kind of more for me about being transparent and kind of managing my own reaction to change, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you for that. And Jamie, the other question for you was, have you found that despite the layoffs, that the pay and benefits are better working in the corporate sector as opposed to the academic world?
Well, a tenured librarian makes a pretty good living, but I think to get there requires a lot of time and investment in adjuncting, which is basically, not a good living. I feel I was hired at a really fair rate, and then when I was laid off and hired at another company, they gave me a higher salary. And then when I was transferred to this one, I didn't ask. I guess, even in this situation, I probably should have asked. But since it was a straight transfer and it was like, you're either laid off or you're not, it just transferred over equally.
Excellent. And then moving on to Scott, we had a question for you from Carter again. When it comes to tasks you are not sure how to do or not directly in your wheelhouse, do you experience imposter syndrome? And if so, what are some of the strategies you have for coping with it or pushing through it?
Absolutely. I still have imposter syndrome sometimes with the things that I'm actually supposed to be skilled at. Some of the strategies. One of the advantages of having the skills that we have as librarians is being able to learn quickly. And so to me, giving myself kind of a quick start and an orientation about what I'm doing. And again, I've never been one to be afraid to ask dumb questions, especially in a situation where I am new. And so, well, quote, dumb questions right there. And so, that's it. The third piece I would put with that is setting expectations and, telling people, well, this is the first time I'm doing it. I'll share a very short example. So when I was at Sun, our research team was looking at getting into competitive intelligence. We had no idea what that meant. And so what we wanted to do was start experimenting with that. So what I did was choose one of my regular clients and told him, this is what we're doing. We've never done this before. Do you mind if we do this on one of your projects? He was totally open to that. And so it provided an environment where we could do that and where, expectations were kind of set all around. So those are, it depends upon the situation. I really don't like faking it for a long time because, it's not sustainable. So anyway, for what that's worth.
Thank you so much. All right, and then our last few questions are for Anne. This question came from Nicholas, and I'm sure we're all wondering, I'm a giant Star Wars nerd myself, but did you actually get to see the Lucasfilm's library? And if so, what kinds of materials did they have?
So I did go up to the Lucasfilm library, and it is gorgeous. It was purported to be George's favorite room at the ranch. So for those who aren't familiar, Skywalker Ranch is the facility that was and still is, even though Lucasfilm is purchased by Disney, is still like the headquarters of Lucasfilm. And so there's lots of buildings around there. The main house, which is lovely, has the research library with a big stained glass dome centerpiece and, really an old-fashioned kind of library with the wood spiral staircases up to the second shelf of the upper shelves of books, and a pathway up above, and you could walk around. I did not spend much time perusing the materials because I had gone up there for, to speak with the librarians, and at other occasions just to walk through. I'd never had the guts, I suppose, at the time to pick a book off the shelf. But generally, it was costuming kinds of materials, set design kinds of things. I think by and large, based on the few titles I did see, but I really can't say for sure what their collection really encompassed.
And then we had another question from Carter, and it was, do you have any advice on how to develop mentor-mentee relationships?
Honestly, I think it is going to come a lot down to personality. So it may not be that the first person you approach is going to be the person who you feel comfortable with as a mentor, or who feels comfortable even being a mentor. Not everyone wants to be a mentor. But there's definitely a personality kind of thing to it. There's people with similar, finding someone with a similar, sense of humor as you. Even one similar interest that isn't work would be helpful, because then you have something to talk about in that regard. And, generally speaking, I think in our profession, we're sharing people, we're service-oriented, we want to help people. So I think the biggest step is going up and talking to someone. And frankly, if you go to a networking event and you talk with someone, and maybe you're just not clicking, or maybe you don't have anything in common, but maybe that person knows someone who's just across the room, and they can introduce you and say, oh, you know what, you're interested in this kind of librarianship or this kind of technology. Well, Scott over there is, let me introduce you to Scott. So it might not be the first person you meet, but being open to those kinds of connections.
Thank you. That's really, really fascinating. I know I have had those questions myself. And then we have, I think, one last question from Jessica that was posed to just the general group. And that was, did you find that group work that you did while you were a student helped you to prepare for working as a team in a professional environment?
I want to say one thing, which is that it helped me in the sense that that when you work on a team, on a group project anyway, on a team, that there's always going to be somebody leading, and somebody or a few people leading, and a few people who you never hear from again until the very end when it's time to put your name on something. That's just been my experience. Not so much on the teamwork side, like the full team. There will always be people who pull more than their weight, and there will always be people who do what's asked of them and not much more. And then there have been a few projects that I've worked on cross department wide, where larger teams, where definitely there were a few people who worked very well and collaborated very well, and then others who did not contribute much. I guess that's sort of my cynical take on my group work at SJSU, but I think that holds true for many.
Alrighty, I think that sums up all the questions we had in the chat. If anyone wants to vocalize any questions for our presenters right now, is the perfect time to go ahead. Oh, we do have one from, oh wait, I think that's an answer, sorry. But yes, that concludes all of the questions that we have for the chat. So anyone, if you would like to ask any more questions, feel free to ask them right now.
I do want to say one thing, which is a plug for SLA. So I am the president of the San Diego chapter, and we have just locked down our date for our fall seminar, which is our big one-day professional development seminar in San Diego. It's October 11th. So mark your calendars. October is a lovely time to visit San Diego. And the topic is going to be building a community of librarians, and it's going to discuss things like solo work, remote work, and network. And I think that I think it sounds pretty exciting. And we would love to have students, come in and get involved with that as well.
That sounds like a lot of fun. You said that was October 11th?
October 11th, and it's a full day event, 8:30 to 4.
Most excellent.
It's a Friday.
A lot of fun. Thank you very much for that.
And if anyone's going to SLA this year, I'm planning our 3rd annual SLA Cider Meetup. I have it almost locked down. I'm just waiting on a couple confirmations of things for putting out the first RSVP schedule, but it's going to be awesome. So come on out to Cleveland and say hi at the Cider Meetup.
Anne, how did I miss that last year?
I don't know. I was posting in the forum all through the whole time. Did you even catch my night before Christmas?
No.
The night before. Oh, yes.
Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Last year was
brilliant.
Baltimore.
It was epic. It was epic, Anne.
Thank you. Yeah, I need a little affirmation there. Last year was great in Baltimore, but in Cleveland, I think it's going to be pretty super awesome.
I'm excited. And I'll get my 3rd glass.
Yay! I hope so. Yes, the last year we did engraved stemless wine glasses for those who wished to have a collectible, and I'm certainly hoping to have enough people interested again this year.
I'm sure you will. All right. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight, everyone that was able to come to this presentation. Also, especially to Anne, Scott, and Jamie, thank you so much for presenting tonight. I know you can clearly see from the questions that we had, a lot of people really enjoyed this tonight. And I'm sure this is one of those presentations I'll probably go back over and watch again because I'm sure I missed something along the way. I did just want to ask you, Francis actually did post the winner in the chat there, but we have another survey for you if you would be so kind as to do it. And Casey, I think you have that. If you could put that in the chat as well. You unfortunately do not win anything for doing this survey, but it does help us out a lot. It gives us some information about who you are, where you're coming from, what you're interested in. So please. Let's see. Casey, do you have that? If not, I can. There we go. Thank you. So there is our other survey. Like I said, unfortunately, won't win anything from this, but it does help us out a lot. But thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Have a good night.